Hello, fellow Americans, and welcome to this segment of the show where we will interview a previous president who has greatly impacted America. This president played a huge role in forming the Democratic Party. He served our country as president from 1829 to 1837. Some would see him as an amazing president, while others would see him as a destructive president. He changed the American banks, exercised his power of the veto, and removed the Indians from their home. Coming back from the dead is our former president, Andrew Jackson.
Hello there, Rachel. How are you?
Oh, hello. Nice to see
Good
you
to be
again.
here. Good to be here. Very good to be here.
So can I ask you a few questions?
I would love to have a little chat today.
So what happened with your cabinet during your term as president?
Well, as we all know, there was quite a bit that went on, and because of the rivalry between Vice President John Calhoun, Secretary of State Martin Van Buren, my cabinet was divided. I decided to form my own cabinet with my trusted friends and advisors. Press began to mock my cabinet by calling it the kitchen cabinet because we met in the kitchen of the White House. I used this kitchen cabinet until 1831. A new official cabinet was formed later in my presidency that I began to turn to, and in my kitchen cabinet was no longer needed.
What problem did you face with nullification during your presidency?
Well, it was a struggle for sure. Congress enacted a high protected tariff. This encouraged the South because their cotton was taxed. This led to less of a demand for cotton from the South. The South nullified this tariff because they found it to be unconstitutional.
Did you support the South Carolina ordinance of nullification?
Well, I was so against the nullification that I asked Congress if I could send in troops to enforce federal law in the face of nullification. Congress revised the tariff with a compromise bill. This allowed South Carolina to back
What
down.
role did you play in the support or opposition of the second bank?
Well, I combated the second bank of the United States, which was supposed to be a private corporation, but actually proved to be nothing more than a government-supported monopoly.
How did you use your presidential power in the form of a veto?
Well, I was the first president to use my power of the veto on policy grounds. Congress made a bill to support the Second Bank of America. I vetoed this bill and broke down the second bank.
Why did you create this specie circular?
Well, the banks were loaning paper money virtually anyone who asked for it. Wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, which led to inflation. I used the specie circular in 1836 to combat inflation. This act assured that every person would have to purchase land with gold or silver only. This made sure that all money was backed up, had value. I preferred hard money because it was the only money that could be
Why did
trusted.
the closing of the federal bank lead to the Panic of 1837?
Well, during my end of my presidency, state banks began to loan out too much money with no gold or silver to back it up. Because there was no federal bank, America fell into depression, and this depression was handed over to the very next president, Mr. Martin Van Buren.
Can you explain the controversies you faced with Indians?
Well, I passed the Indian Removal Act in 1830. This act moved the Indians west, and most of them ended up in Oklahoma.
Can you tell me about your defiance to the Supreme Court?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. Even though the Supreme Court ruled against the Indian Removal Act in the Worcester versus Georgia case, I used my power to pass this act. This showed how much more power I had over the Supreme Court.
Would you say the individual rights of a person is an important concept?
Throughout my presidential career, this is one of the most important concepts I stood by. I abolished the Electoral College, which gave the people more power in electing officials. Sought to protect the rights of the small businesses rather than giving all the power to the large corporations. That's all the time we have.
That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for making time for us. I appreciate your boldness as a president and ability to make change.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time.